The year is 71 BC. The rebellion of Spartacus has failed. 6,000 captured slaves are being crucified along the Appian Way, stretching like a road of rotting bodies for nearly 120 miles. But what the scrolls barely mention, is what happened to the women. Roman senators had gathered like spectators, not for justice, but for entertainment. Slave women were lined up, not in chains, but in shame. Their clothes ripped, their hands bound, their heads shaved. Noble women mocked them, calling them she-animals, unclean, born only to serve. When a slave woman was bought, she wasn't given a new home. She was given a number. A hot iron, pressed into her skin. In fact, Roman writer Cato the Elder once said, "Whenever a slave is no longer useful, sell him like you would sell a broken tool." For Roman slave women, some punishments were not measured in lashes or scars, but in the violation of their very bodies. Sexual abuse was woven into the fabric of slavery. A slave woman could be beaten, branded, and humiliated, but the cruelest masters knew that nothing broke a spirit faster than turning the body into a weapon of submission. Resistance was impossible, refusal could mean death, mutilation, or worse. Women who caught the eye of a master, or even a guest, could find themselves forced into concubinage or brothel work, regardless of age or status. They were punished not only for disobedience but for denying pleasure. Some were tied and whipped, others dragged through the villa naked, forced to endure humiliation in front of family, friends, or even strangers. Desire, in the twisted logic of Roman authority, was an offense that demanded punishment. One particularly brutal practice involved the use of heated irons on intimate parts, a punishment meant to instill fear and enforce compliance. Women who resisted sexual advances could be marked permanently, their bodies branded with fire in ways that left them both physically and emotionally scarred. Their torment was private yet devastatingly permanent, a reminder that their very flesh was not their own. Refusal could also bring death. A young slave girl who resisted a noble's advances might be publicly flogged, then executed in front of other slaves as a warning. The message was chillingly clear: to serve Rome meant total obedience, and the cost of defiance was unbearable. Even acts of minor disobedience, speaking too boldly, refusing a small task, could escalate into sexual punishment, ensuring that fear ran through every corner of the household, invisible yet inescapable. A punishment designed to break both body and spirit involved hanging a woman upside down in front of crowds, her hair brushing the ground, arms bound painfully behind her back. She was left exposed, completely vulnerable, while slaves and citizens watched, some jeering, some horrified. The whip came first, each strike tearing at her back, her sides, her legs, leaving deep welts as blood mingled with sweat. When the lashes ended, she was thrust into a barrel of water, held down until she struggled for every breath. The cycle of hanging, whipping, and drowning could repeat, turning punishment into a public spectacle of terror, a lesson that defiance or even hesitation could cost life itself. The scorpion whip was reserved for the worst defiance. Unlike the flagrum, it had multiple lashes, each tipped with small iron points. The pain was not just physical, it was psychological. Women learned to anticipate the strike, every lash a memory of what they had done wrong. Every strike tore flesh, every drop of blood a lesson in obedience. Sometimes the punishment was public within the villa, with other slaves forced to watch, a warning that defiance could never hide behind silence or submission. But punishment was not only about tools or marks, it was about power. Slave women were forced into humiliating positions, bent over low tables, tied to pillars, kneeling with heads bowed. Clothing torn or removed. They were made to endure pain in complete vulnerability, often while their masters or guests observed. The message was clear: your body belongs to us, your dignity does not exist, and your life is measured only by how well you obey. Some women were punished for offenses that would seem laughably minor. Spilling food, delaying a task, failing to anticipate a need. Yet the punishment was absolute. Rome had no patience for error, no mercy for weakness, and no respect for humanity when it came to its slaves. In these punishment rooms, cruelty became ritualized, almost artistic in its severity, a choreography of fear and dominance that left scars on both body and soul. Disfigurement was another horror. A nose sliced off for looking too boldly at a master. Ears cut to silence perceived insolence. Lips slit or tongues pierced to punish speech. There were even reports of slave women whose hair was torn out by roots or shaved entirely, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Rome believed that fear was a tool, and nothing instilled fear like seeing your own body turned against you. And when the physical torment ended, the mental torment often continued. Some women were kept in isolation afterward, forced to endure hunger, humiliation, and constant threats, learning that even survival was a daily battle. The punishment room was not just a place of pain, it was a crucible designed to erase identity, to break will, and to reinforce the terrifying power of those who owned life itself. In Rome, a slave woman didn't need to steal, betray, or rebel to be punished. She just had to exist in the wrong way. Punishment wasn't always for crimes. Often, it was for inconvenience. Drop a cup of wine. That wasn't an accident. It was disrespect. Speak while the mistress was talking. That wasn't rude. It was insolence. Cry while being beaten. That wasn't pain. It was defiance. In Rome, silence wasn't a choice. It was a requirement. A slave girl named Phaedra, only 14, served in a wealthy Roman household. One evening, during a feast, she spilled olive oil over her master's sandals. The floor was marble. She slipped. She apologized. She begged. But apologies meant nothing. The guests watched as she was dragged, not to a jail, not to a court, but to the garden. Her mistress ordered her punished, not because of the accident, but because there were guests. And in Rome, the dignity of the household was more valuable than the body of a slave. She was tied to a pillar. A servant brought out the flagrum, a whip laced with metal pieces and bone fragments. Each strike didn't just leave bruises, it tore flesh. Blood didn't drip, it splattered. The guests kept eating. No court, no lawyers, no trial, only pain. For speaking without permission, slave women could have their tongues pierced with heated iron needles. For looking directly at their masters, their eyes could be burned with hot oil. For refusing advances, they could be stripped, tied, and publicly flogged in the marketplace, until they stopped screaming, or breathing. In Pompeii, archaeologists discovered chains fixed to the walls of private homes, not prisons, homes. Shackles not for criminals, but for slaves. Proof that punishments weren't always public. Sometimes, the worst pain happened quietly, behind walls that looked like paradise. There was no justice system for slaves. The master was the law. To Rome, a slave was not a person. She was replaceable. Disposable. Returnable.